Hello, my name is Umar, and today we'll be talking about CI, CD, CDS, CDs twice, it's not a mistake. CD stands for two things, they both have the same acronym, it's a bit confusing, but yeah, hopefully by the end of this presentation you'll know what they mean. Cool, so we'll go through the agenda. So first I'm going to give an introduction about myself, then we'll move into definitions. So what is CI, CD, CD? Then we'll start talking about strategies and ways to implement it, and then we have some other strategies which are related in that space. So when we're talking about this, it was originally we're going to talk only about Azure, but I've generalized it just due to the audience and things like that. So slides might be a bit iffy, but hopefully you don't catch any mistakes. If you do, just let me know. And with that, we'll go into the introduction. Yeah, so my name's Umar. I'm a senior software consultant. What that means in reality is I do all kinds of stuff. So I do development, DevOps, testing, architecture, all kinds of things on a day-to-day. It's not really set. I have about 7 years in the IT industry. So some of that's development, some of that's support, things like that. I work mainly in Azure. That's where the title came in, where it was like Azure based, but kind of not dealing with that anymore. And then my programming language of choice is C#. So you can see, we all very .NET Microsoft based. Cool. Okay. So we'll go into definitions. So this is like what is CI/CD. So what I'm going to kind of do is give a bit of a textbook definition, like I read up a slide a bit and then I'll spice it up a bit. So continuous integration basically means code is integrated regularly, typically automatically, and so the code is pushed from multiple sources, automatically processed. Typically also includes quality checks. So what integration means is that it's a process of getting your code updated. So in the simplest, it's literally you just push to a branch and the update gets reflected automatically. In the more complex cases, there's all sort of quality checks and gates and things that the code needs to go through before it gets integrated. So that's CI, and obviously as we go through, we'll see like examples of CI and like how it works. And then we've got the two CDs. Great, a bit of a problem because they've named the same thing. So when someone says CI/CD, you're like, oh, what are you going on about? Which CD are you going on about? Yeah, but it's typically talking about continuous deployment. So that's just code that's regularly moves through all the environments, and it could be gated with checks. So yeah, it's typically in your CI you'd have checks, and then once it passes, it gets moved along. And then there's another thing called continuous delivery, which is also a CD. So that's where the CD comes from, and it's not a typo. So that is basically code is put into a customer-facing environment, even if it isn't complete. And then, that's a bit scary. Obviously, you talk through like strategies and stuff for how to manage that. But that's CD, that's continuous delivery. That's literally I push something, it goes in and it goes all the way through the entire thing. Next I'll talk about environments because these are quite important, so these like boundaries and stuff. So continuous integration happens typically within an environment, and then continuous deployment. So CDP, if you see CD with a little p, it means deployment. If you see CDV with a little v, it means delivery. So the CDP is what moves you through the environments. So that is continuous deployment is moving through an environment. And then continuous delivery is, so it's end-to-end, right? So it's like, as soon as it goes in, it's reflected in there. So that exists, it basically has to go through all the environments. So what I'll do is, a picture paints 1,000 words, right? So this is typically what you'd have. You have something like this. We have a few environments. Dev, test, production. As you see that inside of like dev, we have a CI. So that process of getting the code in checking it is going to happen like within that environment, and then it's going to be put there. And then once we're happy with it, continuous deployment kicks in and it says, okay, move me to the next thing, move me to the next thing. And then, yeah, your continuous delivery is all the way through, because continuous delivery isn't like, oh, I'm going to hold this in test for a while, and then 10 years later I'll put it in production. That's not continuous delivery. Continuous delivery is, even though this code is somewhat incomplete, I'm going to put it in anyways. And obviously need a mechanism for that. It's always a scary thing. It's hard to sell continuous delivery because a lot of people get scared, but there's like mechanisms you'll talk about how to manage that. Cool. Yeah, so a little bit on environments, what are they? You've seen that, the container for the CI, the boundary for the CD. The main thing about environments, I'm not going to get like too much detailed into it, but if you know, you know, if you don't know, you don't know. But the way I'd simplify it is it's just a separation of concerns. So what that means is, as you've seen in the previous one, I'll just go back to it. Like for example, I'll just explain what's going on here. So you have a dev environment, that's basically where developers can mess around and do things, and then you have a testing environment where QA can go in and test without the developers breaking everything every 5 minutes. And then production is your production, customer-facing live environment. So that's just an example of environments. So yeah, some tips when making environments. When you're doing continuous integration, in the dev, typically you should have more checks than in UAT, than in production, because you don't want to slow down the process. We'll talk about time management afterwards, but yeah, so, and as well, typically, another thing that we're not going to get too much into because we're talking about strategy is cost as well. So this says avoid making them the same size. You know, if you had the full production kind of like server in dev, but only 5 people use it, you know, you're paying for like, you know, a massive server that no one uses. So you got to think about it as well. There's trade-offs to that, yeah, which we can get into later. Cool. So now we'll move on to strategies and like how to implement some examples and stuff. So here is some examples of a CI/CD pipeline, CD pipeline. So you'll see from what I said on the previous slide, but the dev is bigger than the test, is bigger than the production, right? What I'll do is I'll explain a bit about the testing triangle, and then we'll come back to this. So if there's any QAs in the audience, don't worry, I'll come back to it. But if there's any QAs in the audience, they'll be, well, there you go, there's the little bug. You see unit test, it's, oh well, so yeah, unit test, great. Everyone knows this triangle, I hope. But yeah, if not, I'll quickly run through it. So you got your unit tests, your integration tests, and your end-to-end tests. So this is the testing triangle, and what it says is, I'll give you an example. So let's just say I'm developing a web API. So it's just a back-end service. What I want to do is I want to do a lot of unit tests. The majority of my testing should be done as unit tests, and testing that in isolation, right? Testing that service in isolation and having lots of unit tests so that I'm confident in it. But then we can start moving into, there's no API tests on there, but we'll just skip over that. But then we can move into integration, and you'll see that obviously it's a triangle, so it gets smaller as you get towards the top. So now, if you're confident that you've properly tested your API, you don't have to do like tons of integration testing. And one thing with integration testing is you don't want to do overlap. You know, you might make a ton of integration tests which actually are testing your service. You know, an integration test can take longer because there's multiple components. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to do isolation, right? So in unit test, you're isolating one service. In an integration test, you're talking service to service and the connection between them. And then you want to do as little as possible end-to-end tests. And the reason is end-to-end tests take a long time as well, because they're typically like one flow. So if you were talking about it like, so unit testing is service itself, integration testing is the links between them. End-to-end testing would be like an entire flow fueling, through the whole application. And obviously that could take a long time, so you need to try and reduce that. So yeah, that's the testing triangle, and it kind of comes in here. But yeah, so we'll go back to the previous slide, and so you'll understand why we have so much in dev, less in test, and then even less in production. So yeah, so I'll start explaining like some of these components. So this is just an example. If you were creating a backend, you're not going to do UI tests in there, right? It doesn't even have a UI, so this is just like an example of what you could have in there. So obviously we talked about unit tests. Next we're going to move on to something called static analysis and dynamic analysis. So static analysis, basically what this is like, it's basically linting. So what it means is that you're not actually running the code, but you're doing checks on it. So that would be stuff like dependency checkers, tools like Sneak. Does anyone know what Sneak is? Yeah. So that could check for licensing issues, outdated packages, security issues, like that, just by checking the version of a NuGet package. So that's more static stuff. There's quality tools like SonarQube, which can use to do code coverage. If you have a quality gate, we need to have 80% code coverage, 90% code coverage, and that's where that kind of comes in. And remember, this is running in the pipeline. So when you push your code, now we're not going to talk about branching strategies, but let's just say I've merged it in, and it's going to kick off this process. You can even do it for a branch and kick off this process, but let's not get into the weeds of that. That's not what we're here for. But yeah, basically, once you push some code, this process is going to run. So first, you can have it in any order really you like, because this is just an example. But this is some of the stuff you have in there. So you have your static analysis, and then you got your dynamic analysis. So this one's more fun. This one is actually running the application itself. So what you want to do is, like, for example, performance testing kind of like is a dynamic analysis, even though I put it separate, the type of dynamic analysis. A good one of this is like a memory footprint of your application, like monitoring that, because you can only test that when it's running. Things about utilization, all of that kind of stuff. So that's the when it's actually running. And then there's also like security tools as well. So when you see these analysis, there's all different types of analysis. So security is a good one. Tools like OWASP Zap you can put in your pipeline, and what that does is it just does everyone know the OWASP top 10 security threats? Yeah. If you don't, it's just like a list of security threats, but most common ones. And they've got a tool that basically you can run on your pipeline, and it will go and hammer your API and check if there's any exploits. Most common probably SQL injection or something like that. Yeah, we're not going to get into weird that because OWASP is a bit of a pain to set up, because sometimes it gives back weird errors and stuff. But and then we've got stuff like API tests, mocking. Okay, so because we're in a dev environment, if you go here, we're doing only unit testing, but we're not doing integration testing. But we might want to test certain things, like an API might have a reliance on a third party. So mocking is, we could like for example have that in dev. So this is not prescriptive, right? Some, depending on the maturity of your organization. Here I'm kind of assuming test is a safe environment, so all third party integrations are going to work. It might not actually work, and then you need to mock it in test as well. But again, this is just an example. This isn't, just choose wherever you want. Things like that. So you might have mocking in there, you might have performance in there. Cheeky K6 test in there to like check. This is more. You want to check the NFRs. We need like response time in a certain amount or something like that. Or it needs to be scalable or things like that. Yeah. And then obviously we've got UI accessibility, UI automation. Obviously if it's a front end, it's going to be different. You're going to be doing more of the bottom stuff than the top stuff, obviously. But yeah, obviously, just an example. And then we move into our test environment. You see it's smaller, just like the triangle is. And here, we're more focused on like API tests, performance, accessibility, UI automation, and even some end-to-end tests in there. Yeah. So when I say API tests, that should say integration tests as well, because we need to check that it connects properly. Sorry about that. Yeah, oops, another mistake. But yeah, just imagine it says integration tests in there as well. Yeah, because API test is only for one API. Integration test would be wherever that API connects to. So yeah, cool. And then in production, you might still have an end-to-end test just to make sure your production environment's all right. But typically, you could just have a smoke test, something simple, right? You don't want to be messing around with a production environment and creating a ton of data. That's not really what you want. Yeah, unless you've got a proper strategy for filtering it out. But yeah, obviously on production you want a light touch because that's customer facing. Yeah, cool. So that's kind of a bit about like more of the how-to. Now we're going to start talking about like a more strategic and like time considerations and things like that. I think an important thing is there's tons of stuff on here, right? You don't have to implement it tomorrow, right? When you're gonna implement proper CI, CD strategy, you're gonna need people from DevOps or platform, you're gonna need people from QA, you're gonna need obviously developers, you're gonna need product, you need everyone to come together and make a proper plan, because this isn't something you're gonna do tomorrow. This is gonna take, depending on how mature your organization is and how many things your organization does, it could take years to actually get something like this implemented. Yeah, I mean, we're all developers here, I believe, so we all know that, we don't get 100% of the stuff done, there's always some tech debt somewhere, so yeah, when you see this, don't be like going, oh, I've seen it on this slide, so I have to do it. I've got a back-end API, but since this guy put UI accessibility on there, I'm going to do it on purpose just because, you got to use your brain a bit. So yeah, and what I've done is in this, as I said, I've tried to not go into like specifics and like extreme details, because I don't think that's really that beneficial. Probably more beneficial for you to get like the knowledge instead. Cool. Yeah, so we'll go to time considerations. So when you're making these type of pipelines, you have to be careful. I'm going to go back here. I'm going to keep flipping back and forth. For example, again, end-to-end test, it could take a really long time. So you have to think, will I be holding developers up? If I have this fancy pipeline with 10 trillion things in it, what if somebody needs to push to dev? Well, it's going to take 10 years for all of these things to run. So you need to balance it as well. That's a very important thing, time management. You've got to think about it, all the trade-offs. Yeah, again, effects on disaster recovery, if you're trying to redeploy something, but then it takes like 10 years, and obviously, you're not going to meet any recovery objective. So you need to think about that, that's why you need a strategic view of it and understand it properly. And like, that's why you speak to other people, we all understand like functional requirements. They're easy, right? The story says do X, you do X. Okay, that might be, you don't have to ask people what X means, but like, what you always need to keep in mind as well is non-functional, availability, performance, reliability, all of those kind of things. And, this strategy affects that strategy. So you've got to think about it. It's not as simple as, I've seen this guy once, he did a talk once, and I'm going to go implement everything he did. You've got to really think about it. Cool, yeah. I think another thing as well is like, I'll put performance test in there, right, in a CI/CD pipeline. It doesn't have to be. Who said it has to be? Just because on a slide doesn't mean it needs to be in there. Just like I'm testing the backend API, why am I going to do UI accessibility, UI automation? I might not do performance test. I might go, well, depending on what the performance test is, if it's like a, 2-minute, 3-minute little blast scene after it's scaled properly, okay, fine. But like, if I want to do like load testing or any other, extensive, testing, as long as I've done a separate pipeline, and that can run, once a day, maybe once a week, maybe once a month, depending on like, what's acceptable. So yeah, you don't have to put everything on. Obviously, load testing and things like that can, another one is dynamic analysis. It can take up a lot of developer time because you have to go and configure. Oh, this is my endpoints, and it might, like, for example, it might say, oh, SQL injection, and you're like, okay, but we're using link and we've already kind of taken care of that, so you might get a false positive and things like that. So you have to be a bit like clever with like how you're gonna set that up. So yeah, there's like time considerations as well. And as I said, you're not going to implement all of this tomorrow. The most important thing is, this is just an example of like things, but your organization might have something specific, right? But choose like the heavy hitters first. The quick wins, the things that you can implement. Unit tests are typically very cheap, right? You just set something up. You can, unit tests. There's already templates. If not, you can go Google it. How to do unit tests for if you're using C# in a pipeline. It's pretty simple and pretty quick to set up. And I think in fact, yeah, you already have unit testing tasks and stuff in Azure and stuff. So not easy. Whereas something like dynamic analysis, you need to think about that and think about what's the cost benefit. You might not need a dynamic analysis because you might actually have a penetration testing team. So, and they have their own schedule and stuff. So then do you need that dynamic analysis automatically in a pipeline? Probably not, because they're going to be testing your application and they're going to find the same things that dynamic analysis like OWASP's app is going to find. So again, it's not just, I've seen this guy, once he talked about this talk and he said, yeah, do this and I'm going to put it in my pipeline. You've got to think strategically and what actually makes sense. So that's why I keep saying these are all examples. Because obviously in the real world, in real organizations, they're structured differently. I mean, there's organizations that have, 5 environments. There's organizations that have 2 environments. This is just an example. It doesn't mean that you need to set it up this way. This is just so, just for this talk for the purpose of explaining. Cool. Yeah, that's time consideration. And we're going to talk about managing continuous delivery, the scary one. So if you go back, yeah, this is the scary one. This is some random developer just pushes something, and straight into customer-facing environment. Very scary thing, obviously not. Very hard to get to get people to agree to that. It's very tough. But there's a few ways of managing it, and we'll start to get into that. So yeah, we can't just be pushing broken code into the live environment. Obviously, that's not good. One of the tools is feature flags, which you probably already know about. I know someone in the audience already does. So that's one of the tools you can use to get around this. So what a feature flag is just a switch. You wrap your code in a switch and then you can turn it on and off. So what you would typically do is you would push to live with it off, and then once you're confident that work is done, you turn it on. So yeah. Oops, I just went fast. Yeah, and then as well, another thing is deployment strategies. This is important as well. This is to do with CD actually, and a bit with continuous delivery. But typically you should try and use like a parallel approach. Now, depending on your non-functional requirements in your organization, you'll have to pick a different approach. They kind of get more complex as you go up the stack. So Canary can be complex. You can actually tie it in with feature flags as well, but Canary is typically like you set a percentage, and a percentage of users, kind of like get that piece of code. The problem is if you push broken code, then let's just say you set Canary 20%, 20% of users are going to have a broken site, so it's not ideal. Then you have to go and redeploy the entire thing. So but it's one of the candidates you can do to deploy. You've got a beta site which is just completely parallel. Obviously that one's expensive. you're gonna have to spin up a whole new environment to put your new one on, and then you're paying twice as much, and then you're trying to get approval for it, and like, no mate, we already told you that it's costing too much. Or you're going to go and add another bloody environment, going on about, go on, get out of here. You might get that, So you have to be careful around that. But that's, in an ideal world, that's actually the best. But there is upsides and downsides to it. But I don't think we really have the time to really be going into like hours and hours of detail on that. And then we've got our feature flag, which I've explained. It's a toggle you can turn on and off. Various ways to do it. There's tools like Launch Darkly. There's tools like you can just whack it in a database and manually update it. You can use things like app configs to do that. But yeah, the whole idea of that is I'm pushing something that's not full and turning it off. And then of course blue-green. So that is where you're pushing it to a separate resource, checking it. So what blue-green means is, so let's just say you have your existing environment and it's green, existing resource, sorry, not an entire environment. Your existing resource, it's green. Let's just say I'm pushing a website. So a website for now is green because it's the one that's in production. And then what you do is you spin up a new website and you push the new code to it. You do your checks, all good, goes green, then you enable that one. And then the other one becomes and then you swap it over, and that one becomes the one then you're going to push to. So just like swapping them around. Blue-green deployments, that's a really good one. Great. Yeah, we're back. Technical issues. Yeah, it's because I talk too much, that's the problem, isn't it? Yeah. Even the computer's telling me to shut up. No, yeah, it is what it is. I'll try it. I said, I'm not going to get into details, but can't help myself, can I? It is what it is. Cool. I'm going to talk about some other strategies as well. These aren't actually necessary, but they're still good things to do. So we'll talk about it. So one of them is infrastructure as code. That's actually a really good one, because then you can start putting infrastructure deployments as part of CI if you really wanted to. I mean, I've done it before. It is a bit crazy, but you can do it. Typically, you can have it separate. There's nothing stopping you having two pipelines and having two sets of CI, CD, and things like that. So yeah, treat infrastructure deployment the same as code. How we do that typically through templates. So just a few of the normal. Since obviously this was originally an Azure focused kind of like presentation, I made it a bit more general. That's why it's only Terraform, ARM, and Bicep. But like using AWS, you might be using CloudFormation, things like that. And basically you can have this as a part of a CD. So the reason we do this is, remember that CI process, we can do that but for the template as well, for the infrastructure deploy. And that infrastructure deploy can be automated as well. So instead of getting a DevOps engineer, calling them up and saying like, can you do this? Can we get permission to do this and that? And do that, long chase. You just update the template. It gets reflected CI, and then CD it updates the environments for you. So that's really how you use infrastructure code as like in the CI/CD. You could also just manually deploy the template, but then kind of ask, why did you make a template? I mean, it is reusable, but yeah. And then I think a really good with IAC is, once you've got like a basic template, if you're doing a bunch of microservices, once you've got the template down, it makes it a lot easier to like set up environments for everything else, because now you have a template and you can just start sharing that template and whacking it to all the pipelines and making it. It's very scalable because it's like code as a template, easy to reuse. The problem is when there's an error in that template. Now you got to go back and fix 100 things. All you have to do is update the template and updating all of them. But yeah, there's just things like that. Try not to go too much into details on it, but it is what it is. And then you've got templating pipelines. So yeah, you can actually template your pipelines, and that's a recommended strategy for producing pipelines. So this is kind of like a bit outside of CI/CD. This is like before I even like get into it. this is like, how do I even like make the, because I can do CI/CD, right? But I could have it like, I could have a engineer, DevOps engineer set a pipeline up every single time. So basically what we're doing is, like in the infrastructure template, we're templating the pipeline itself. And this is, like I said, back to microservices. You know, you could, you know, like it might not be feasible to have, you know, depending on the maturity of the organization, it might not be feasible to have someone making a pipeline for each new service if you've got microservices, you know. Or if you're going to make like, you know, 20 new services and you need it in a week, it's not possible. But with templating, you can cut that time down a lot, because it's just a template and just reuse that template. So for example, if you go back here, all I do is, like, for example, create a template for back end, and then create a template for front end, and then for every front end, boom, template, easy peasy, change a few variables, there you go. For every single back end I've got, change a few variables, and then for every like new type of service, you know, you might have to mess around with it, but yeah, you can always use it as a base as well. So for example, I could go back end, create a base, front end, because there's some common stuff, then reuse the template and just update it and then create a front end one. So you're making a template off a template, you know what I mean? And then you can make a template off a template off a template, and we can go on forever like that. And obviously, because there's shared things in them, it's really fast. So yeah, cool. Templating and pipelines, yeah, and then that's it. Questions? I don't know if we have time for questions, but yeah, I think we're up.
Got one.
Yeah.
Do you know in your diagram you had all the arrows and you had like CI and CD and CD, the delivery one?
Yeah.
So like post continuous deployment and continuous delivery deployed to prod.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Which one? So if you were releasing your software, which pipeline?
So it's one pipeline.
The whole thing's one pipeline.
One pipeline, yeah. So yeah. So the CI, so it's CI/CD/CD, so it's kind of all in one. These aren't separate pipelines. What I'm trying to show here is the separation, right, between where does CI take place. So this is one pipeline, but like where does it take place? So CI typically takes place in there. It's like bounded here, and then CD is bounded between them, and then CD is like conceptual, yeah.
So so if I kind of committed some code in a branch, and you kind of like, you want it deployed to dev,
yeah.
How do you kind of stop it from going to test and prod, you know?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
All the way
So, do you want to stop it just because you want to, or do you want to stop it because there's an error in it?
Just because you don't want it to deploy to prod every time
Okay,
you
yeah,
commit
yeah.
code here, I guess
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
like gates or
Yeah,
you have
yeah.
like a release window.
Okay, I'll talk about it too. I'll just talk about both.
Yeah.
I think, is Casimir, where is he? Alright, he's not here, I'll just take a little bit extra time. Just don't tell him about it. He'll probably walk in and say, oh woman, I told you, you said 20 minutes. Yeah, it's because I can talk for England, that's why. So yeah, okay, so let's just say I only want to deploy to dev, and there's nothing wrong with my code, I just only want to stop it there. So what you can do is, depending on, now this depends on the service you're using, and what you can typically do is you can typically select stages in the pipeline. So I didn't talk about stages and stuff because I didn't want to like, you know, go crazy into it, you know, because I want to talk about the architecture and like, you know, the more strategic stuff. But what you could do is you could like select stages,
Right.
and say I'm only running this one stage, and it will run the CI as long as wherever's in that stage is going to be run. So I could select, like, for example, where did I put it? Yeah, here, yeah. So let's just say I wanna stop in test. I'll just choose dev and test, and then I'll stop there. But I don't want to go into production. Yeah. Alternatively, if there's an error, you can make the pipeline fail, and then you can do all kinds of stuff with that. Obviously, the pipeline fails, it's not going to continue. There's stuff like rollbacks and things like that, which is getting a bit into the weeds. But yeah, that's the whole point of the CI, because like, for example, if it fails a unit test, obviously you want it to stop instantly, right?
Yeah.
As well, you got to talk about. I don't have to go into the details now. All right.
You don't have to.
So, you know, I'm trying to be all strategic and all architecture, you know. All, you know. Oh well, yeah. So, how you actually do your pipeline is quite important, because what you can do in a pipeline is you typically, when it errors, it will stop. But what you can do is you can actually force it to continue if it has an error. And you can do stuff like check with conditions. So I might have like a rollback stage in here. So as long as everything's green, no rollback. If there's an error and it's red, the pipeline will put that in a variable, and then that step can read that variable and go, oh, there was an error. Now I'm going to go and do an automatic rollback. Yeah, things like that. Yeah. So like, there's a lot of fancy stuff you can do in a pipeline. That's why I was only like giving examples in high level. But yeah, we can go into details if you've got time. Yep.
Yeah, I can go to that. You can design it which way you want.
Yeah.
So you could have each pipeline, you could have your prod environment in a separate account, and only certain people can execute from that. And you have shared. It's yeah, we could go well into detail of this. And you have a shared account which has the artifact.
Yeah.
And only people. This is why we use Jenkins for our deployment tool, because Azure and AWS are, for me, immature, to be honest. And then you have roles, so only administrators can. It all depends on the scale of the, but you can design it any way you want.
Yeah. Can I?
Also, and also you have you get strategy is important with developers. For example, if you go into prod, you need to do a hotfix ASAP. You build it from your branch, deploy it, get it artifact, and get it to prod. But normally you go to dev and then through that. So the way it's all designed now is very flexible.
Yeah. So remember, this is all like high level architecture and strategy. So it's not a direct like what you should do, and then anything on here is just an example to give you like a flavor. Because really what you could do is you could have a pipeline kick off a pipeline, which kicks off a pipeline and kicks off a pipeline and kicks off another pipeline. If you want to do that, like why not?
It all depends on the scale and the size.
Exactly.
The
Again,
application.
what I would say again is think about the maturity of your organization. So this is where like a bit of thinking comes in, a bit of strategy, you know. Just think about like, you know, I can't go tomorrow to a company and say, boom, we're doing all of this. You're going to say, oh, well, what's going to happen to the current sprint? How are you going to fit this in? Planning, what's going on? You know what I mean? How long is it going to take? You know, things like that. You know, how big is your team and all of that? And like, what value does it bring? You know, again, it can, because you know, it can be hard to like bring up a value because this is going to cost the company. But you know, you say, well, it's an upfront cost. Hopefully, it cuts down on bugs and things like that. And you can adhere more to your SLAs and things like that. But yeah, there's a whole aspect around that. That's why I keep talking about NFRs, non-functional requirements, things like that. You got to think about. You know, you don't just go in and say, oh, tomorrow I'm going to go do this. You have to really think about your organization and what's going to fit your organization. I mean, even in the same organization, you might have a pipeline with 2 environments, then a pipeline with 5 environments, and a pipeline with 3 environments. It just depends on what like type of product it is that you're putting out. So yeah, at the end of the day, this is all like pie in the sky. But hopefully what you take away from this presentation is more of like why we're doing what we're doing, and like kind of a bit like, and just a bit of a sort of like how we're doing it, and like things like that. I appreciate I didn't go into the details. I mean, I think we've overrun by, what is it now? Yeah, it's almost 6:45. I think this is roughly 6 to 6:30. We're yeah, no, I'm happy to take. You know what? I'll stop until Cassim comes in and he kicks me off. Yeah, cool. I appreciate there's another speaker. So please, Alex. Yeah. Are you happy for me to continue, or do you want me to stop it? Yeah, because I don't want to mess up your timing as well, you know. Yeah. Cool. I'll just continue. Sorry about discussing the cameras. Right. Yeah. Any more questions? Oh, yeah. We're finished soon as he walks in the door. That's it. Yeah. We're done. Cool.
Brilliant. Thank you, Matt.